Hi, it's Jake with Twigs Nursery. Today we're going to have a tutorial on rooting and planting willows. This applies to your hybrid willows, your os trees, your weeping willows, corkscrew willows, globe willows. If it's a willow, it's all the same method. So these steps we're going to talk about today should guide you through it. And it's pretty easy. You'll receive this package in the mail. Open it up, get it out of its bag, and they'll typically be bounded in bundles. Whether you ordered 1 or 10, 100, 1,000, they're going to come in bundles. And the bundles will have a rubber band around them. What we advise you do is just keep them like this. Carefully undo the rubber band, very carefully, just in case they have some roots on them. And then take this paper towel off. Now the paper towel may arrive dry, just depending on the time of year that it was shipped. So in the late summer, in the midsummer, we give it enough moisture to get to you. That keeps the starts alive, but that may mean that it's dry. And when you receive the starts themselves, they may appear dry. That does not mean they're dead. They are just in a dormant state, and they just need to be activated by water. Also, your starts may look something like this, where about 8 to 12 inches here. No roots, nothing. It's just a fresh cutting, brand new fresh cutting. But it also could arrive looking something like this, where you've got a few little starts on it. Some of these roots have began, and it may arrive somewhere in between, where it's got little white nubs. If you look at this one right here, you can see some little white nubs. Those are the beginnings of roots. So no matter how it arrives to you, whether it's a little bit dry or a little too wet, these starts are so forgiving. And so don't be dismayed. The other thing is, when you open that bag, sometimes it does not have a good smell. I will be honest. We've had a lot of customers say, man, that doesn't smell good. And it may even have a little bit of moss on it. But it's better to be too moist than not enough at certain times of year. And so that moss doesn't hurt the starts in any way. You can actually spray it down with hydrogen peroxide, and that'll get rid of that moss if it bothers you. It also kind of helps with the smell. All right, so next step, we want you to grab a pot. I'm showing you a jar just for illustration purposes so you can see the water level. But we actually recommend you get a pot. Depending on how many we're starting here, I mean, we've got a lot in here. We've got all kinds of shapes and sizes in here. But this is a nice black pot. They root better in a dark pot. So the light actually hurts the roots. And so we've had a lot of customers say, hey, I rooted in this jar, or we get a picture of them rooting in a jar, and they root fine. Just they don't root as good as they would if you put them in a pot. So fill that pot up with water, about halfway up or 3/4, just because you got to kind of account for evaporation. This is one of the biggest things, is these starts are just gonna, especially in the summer month, they're gonna just gobble up this water. And you also have to factor in that a lot of that water is gonna evaporate. So one of the keys to this is keeping this pot, but we're looking at a jar here, full of water while you're rooting them. Another key is to not put them in direct sunlight. So direct sunlight on some of these fresh branches can kind of scorch them. They'll start to turn a little bit black. We like to do indirect. So it's perfect to have it just kind of over here, still getting a lot of sunlight, but it's not directly on it. Some people will put them near a windowsill. If the sunlight gets on it for a few hours, that's not going to hurt it. But we prefer indirect, good sunlight. The other thing is, in the winter, if you're rooting them and you think you're going to have some freezing temperatures, you want to go ahead and do that inside. Keep them inside in the winter, and you don't want to plant them until it's done freezing. Definitely don't want to put them out there, have a cold snap, and that could kill them right away. So it's okay to actually start them in the winter if you want to. I mean, you're welcome to start them inside. When we get to the planting spot in a second here, I'll show you can plant them in a pot, and then you can transport them to your ground. All right, so after they've been in here for about 3 to 4 weeks is normally what we say. If they come without any roots, you're looking at 3 to 4 weeks of rooting before you plant. Now the nature of willows is kind of cool. Like you can plant them as is. I could literally take this start and put it in the ground and water the heck out of it and it'll grow. However, it's going to grow a lot quicker if we do this rooting method, and you're going to have a better chance of survival. So as they sit in this water, they'll kind of go through different stages of growth. You're first going to have this stage that we were looking at with these little white nubs. That comes in a few weeks. Sometimes the leaves come in first. Sometimes the roots come in first. We never know. In one batch, you may have some slow starters and some quick ones. Don't be dismayed. They'll all come around, or most of them anyway. Now, after they've been in the water for about 3 to 4 weeks, take them out, and you want them to be about here. This is a good spot before we plant. If you've kept them in a little too long, then you've got something like this. Which too long, I mean, too long is not bad, but if they're in for more than, I would say, like 2 months, we're probably looking at, they need some nutrients. They're probably not going to do so good. And so this is an example of it's probably been in there a little too long, but it's still going to be okay. What you want to do is you want to cut off this extra growth. Maybe just leave a couple inches and cut everything else off. Looks like it's got a little leaf here. And then bury that to the root line and water the heck out of it, and it'll still be all right. But ideally, this is kind of where you want to plant it. This is a perfect spot. Now, grab yourself this would typically be in a, well, let me grab you this one. This will be easier to see. So if it's winter, you're putting it in a pot. I like to put it in a bigger pot. If it's winter, you want to put a lot in here, you know. Maybe put, I don't know, 12 different starts in a pot this size. Just because saves you space. Make sure it's got good drainage for when you water it. Now when we're planting this, you want to be really careful. As you do this, you know, I like to get it a little bit wet before we plant it. The soil is important. You do not want to use Miracle-Gro. You do not want to use any soil that has fertilizer. Fertilizer is bad. These willows come with their own natural fertilizer. So if you add fertilizer, or if you, you know, if you buy potting soil that has fertilizer in it, then that can actually over-fertilize and kill the starts. So just good garden dirt, and just kind of make it a little hole in here, make it a little spot. Make sure it's low enough that you'll go to the root line. So this is about halfway up on this start. We recommend about halfway roots or 3/4 roots, somewhere around there. You want to have most of it buried. And gently put it in there, and then gently backfill. I mean, look how gently I'm backfilling here. You don't want to damage these little fragile roots. If you do, if you damage a few of them, it's all right. They'll come back. But as much as possible, we want to preserve them. We want to be careful. And then do just a little light packing right there. And then water, water, water. You want to put water on this thing. Make it soaked. Just drench it. And as the water gets on it, you'll see it kind of settle. You'll see the soil settle. And then you want to kind of backfill it again so that those roots are covered. Now, if you accidentally did your roots up to here, I mean, it was this deep in water the whole time, no big deal. What we recommend is just trim those roots down about halfway or 2/3 away, and then, or sorry, 1/3 of the way, and having the 2/3 of the roots under the ground. And it's okay to trim those roots off. It just needs about that many. Now, key after this, Ash, if you want to back up a little bit, the key after this is to keep it watered, okay? Keep it in the sun and keep it watered. Again, indirect's best, but once it's in the ground, wherever you're planting, if it's in your yard or wherever, if it's in the heat of the day, the heat of the summer, it might be better to maybe try to get a little bit of shade on it. But these are pretty hardy, and so just water the heck out of it. If you've got an irrigation sprinkler system or a drip line, that's going to be your best bet. They need water every day for the first few months. Now, one of the reasons you chose a willow is because it's going to grow really fast. The first year, not quite as fast, but it all depends on the water. So even after it's established, you know, if you want to keep watering it, you're going to have better results. You just keep the water coming. And no pesticides, no weed killer around it. Some people are worried if they put it out in a field, if you've got a lot of cheatgrass or weeds, sure, you could bark around it. You could even do a weed tarp if you want. Once this start gets a little bigger, it's not going to care about the weeds. So you can just water, 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 and it'll be fine. As far as trimming goes, once this gets bigger, maybe next year, or I would almost say in 2 years, you can cut this. If you chop the tops off, it'll actually force it to do some denser growth below, and if you cut the bottoms, it'll force it to shoot it up. So remember, these grow as much as 60 feet up, but for people that don't want them that high, once a year you need to lop them, and that'll keep them nice and dense and thick for a privacy hedge. Additionally, we recommend you plant these about 5 feet apart, 3 to 5 feet apart if you want a good privacy hedge. Another great way is to stagger them and do 2 rows about 5 feet apart, and then about 10 feet apart, so they're staggered, which is also a great way to do it. We also have people use these for living fences. You can literally weave them into structures, which is really neat. And they're just really versatile, fast growing. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Hope you like your product.